it's a great pleasure to ask Dr. Michael Selss from the University of Chicago to come and speak today about religion and genocide in Bosnia.
It's a wonderful pleasure to be here and to be the recipient of this marvelous hospitality. I'd like to thank all of those who came together to make these events possible. I'd also like you in the audience to let me know if I'm not audible. I got off the plane and one of my ears is still not popped. I might have to wait till I fly back the other direction. Let me mention some personal reasons that brought me into this topic on religion and genocide in Bosnia, and some issues that come out of the personal reasons having to do with the placement of those of us who use terms like genocide and our reactions to them. So I'll start out by mentioning how I became actively involved. In the spring of 1992, I was at a small workshop at the University of Pennsylvania on Middle Eastern literatures. And during one of the breaks, a dear friend who was then a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, Walter Feldman, mentioned to me what was happening in the former Yugoslavia. Something about the way he mentioned it sounded very ominous to me. I said, well, you know, it's a tragic situation. You have this former nation which is now dissolving into various many nation states that want their independence, and some groups that don't want this dissolution, similar to what happened in the American Civil War in that sense. And there's terrible violence, but something bothered me further about the way Walter depicted it. And I started looking in the back pages of newspapers, and what I found was this was not simply a civil war in which armed groups were fighting one another for territory, either for secession or for maintaining the Yugoslav Federation. And it was certainly not a situation where, as the newspaper reports and the television news seemed to say, it was violence on all sides. It was not violence on all sides. It was violence carried out by organized military units and militias against unprotected civilians for the most part. There were few major battles at first. There was the famous siege of Sarajevo, but the Bosnian government, which was under that siege, really had very little military force to fight back with. As I began reading the back pages of the newspaper, I became astonished to learn that 50 years after the terrible events of World War II in Europe, it could be said in an American newspaper on back pages that in such and such a village, all the religious shrines of such and such a religious group were systematically annihilated, that major massacres were occurring, that camps were being set up for torture and killing of targeted groups, and that this was happening in every area, that was every town and every village that was being taken by these militias that were carrying out what is called ethnic cleansing. What was happening in Bosnia? It was a picture of the National Library in Sarajevo on fire. This was an elegant Austrian period building in Moorish style that housed one of the major collections in southeastern Europe. It had been deliberately shelled, picked out, and shelled with phosphorus grenades. Nothing around it was touched for 3 days. Most of the collection was destroyed, over 1 million books. And people of Sarajevo, Serbs, Serb Orthodox, Serbs, Catholic Croats, Muslims, people with no particular religious affiliation, people of other ethnic groups, formed a human chain to try to save what books they could. As one of the survivors of that chain told me, whose sister was killed in the effort, for 3 days, ashes were kept falling down on Sarajevo from the books that had been burned and had gone up into the air, and then it took a while for them to filter back down. On May 17th of 1992, the Serbian militias controlled by General Ratko Mladic deliberately burned down the Oriental Institute, the largest collection of Arabic, Persian, Ottoman, and El Khamiado, that is Serbo-Croatian and Arabic script manuscripts in Southeast Europe. Over 2,000 mosques and shrines dating back to the 15th century were destroyed, and in areas that were taken by ethnic militias, ethnic cleansing militias led by Croat generals, almost all Serb Orthodox and Muslim heritage was destroyed. In areas taken by General Ratko Mladic and the irregular militias from Serbia proper, almost all Catholic and Muslim shrines were destroyed. This was a systematic effort. This was not collateral damage during battle. Almost all of the shrines were destroyed after a town or village had been taken. The people were separated out. Indeed, many people said, I never thought of myself as being a Muslim or a Catholic until the militias came. I thought of myself as being a Yugoslav. And then the militias would come and they would separate people out according to categories, either by their first name, by their names, if that were indicative of their religious affiliation, or by using the records that the Communist Party had established that were being used by the leaders of ethnic cleansing, most of whom were former members of the party, to find out a person's ethnic or religious identity and target them for either killing or expulsion. Another moment that helped transform consciousness in the world about what was happening, from the generalities about guilt on all sides and civil war, etc., were pictures by accompanying riveting dispatches by Roy Gutman, who later won the Pulitzer Prize for these dispatches. Roy Gutman was in Europe to cover the events around the end of the Cold War and the fall of the Berlin Wall. And he happened to be in Bosnia at the time, and he was able to talk himself into, at great danger to himself and with extraordinary insistence, into the detention camps run by Serb militias, radical Serb militias in northern Bosnia, and was able to write about the systematic killings and tortures that were going on in these camps, the way that people were bussed into them, the way that the bodies were being disposed of in mines and other mass graves.